dedicated and figure know that they have a very wide and varied background. They're involved in many different things. And we were talking about finally we're able to do soil sampling again here in Aiken County. Get that started up again. So that's a boom here for us. Yeah, you may recognize her also from her frequent appearances on SCETV, Making It Grow. They've seen her on those. Love that program. Do you do any of the Georgia, by the way, have you been invited to do any of the Georgia programs like that, like Ecology Georgia program? Mm-hmm. I throw your name in there, get across the state line. And she's a recognized expert in providing all horticulture related activities and monitoring and now training to her fellow agents. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Vicki.
Yeah, I do a lot of everything now.
Well, Vicki, one thing I meant to mention, and I think we had mentioned it in thinking about, as you know, the fire ants, while they're part of nature, they can also be the enemy of our movement. And a number of issues. She'll cover some of that as well. But if you've ever encountered any of that, not a pretty sight.
The enemy of humans.
Yeah, a lot of things, yeah.
Man.
You in the hospital? So, as Mike said, I'm Vicki Burton-Ollie. I'm a horticulture agent in Aiken County. I was hired by Clemson in January of 2008 is when I started. I worked previously for 7 years as a research technician with the Alabama Fire Ant Management Program. And while I was there, my boss kind of bugged me about it. To go to graduate school while I was there, because typically when you're an employee of the university, you get some kind of tuition assistance. And so I got to go to graduate school for free, and his kind of thrust of this was, you're going to be doing the work, you might as well go ahead and get a degree in it while you're at it. So I worked with fire ants. Our program was a soft money funded program through the state legislature. We funded approximately 10 other researchers with our money. And then we were also doing biological control releases of a little fly that lays an egg inside the fire ant. And eventually it secretes an enzyme that makes the fire ant coat fall off. And so that's what I did my master's work on. And we do have those flies here, but they're not a silver bullet. So we have to use some other tools in our toolbox to manage them. Now, whenever it comes to fire ants, this is one of those things where it would be excellent if everything had a sign on it. I kept you out of the hospital.
Yeah.
But you know, that's not how it works. So right now, like as it is happening right now, who has had swarms of termites at their house? Or they've seen them? Termites. Okay. Right now is termite swarming season. And so I'm getting a lot of phone calls. Are they fire ants or are they termites? And so when we're looking at these things with wings, who says that this one is the fire ant? Okay. Who says this one is the fire ant? Y'all are not voting. Right. There's a lot of people that think. Okay. So there's 3 characters that we're going to look at to find the difference between if it's an ant or if it's a termite. Because if this thing is a termite, we're probably, if you call me, I'm going to tell you if this thing is found outside your house, within, outside of 10 feet from perimeter to your house, I'm going to tell you that they're probably just out in your yard doing their normal thing, breaking down cellulose in their normal natural environment, which is outside. However, if you are finding them inside your house, and you're worried about it, I'm gonna tell you to call the pest control operator and have them inspect your house from foundation to roof. And then y'all can decide if you need a contractor, if there's treatment needed or something like that. So, if they are fire ants, there's a big difference. You can treat the fire ants yourself. However, if they are termites, I am not going to recommend that you try to treat termites yourself. They sell stuff at the store, but I don't recommend it. I recommend that you contact and hire a professional pest control operator to come do that. Particularly ones that are educated about managing termites. Okay, so the three characters at the first are going to be antennae. So termites have straight antennae, and then ants and wasps have elbowed antennae. The $5 word that I went to graduate school to learn is geniculate. It makes me sound smart, right? The second character we're going to look at are the wing. And so when I went to school, Pluto was a planet, and termites were in the order Isoptera. And iso means equal. So what they're talking about is the forewing and the hind wing are equal lengths. And then on ants, the forewing and the hind wing are different lengths. Okay. Just so you know, when they reclassified termites, they are now in the same order as cockroaches. I don't see it, but whenever it's raining, a taxonomist means something to do, so they reclassify stuff. That's what it is. If you're a taxonomist, I'm not worried about one thing. Now, the third character we look at are the waistlines. Termites have a thick waist, and then ants are going to have a constricted waist. So those three characters tell us the difference between ants and termites.
I'm definitely not an ant.
Well, now, my question to you, do fire ants bite or do they sting?
What?
They do both. Yes. Yes, they do both. So fire ants are in the family Formicidae. And what that is whenever they bite, their saliva has a little bit of formic acid in it. And they'll use their mouth parts to make so that they can sting. And then what we have a reaction to are the stings, and it's the alkaloids in the venom that we have a reaction to. They do a lot of nasty things. I have no idea what body part this is, but I really care.
We don't want
wow. But when I'm firing your skin has this reaction and it creates this little pustule. And the pustules are sterile. Ideally, you should not pop these. Now, if you're one of those pimple popper people, this can be an issue. And what happens is when you eat it, then you open yourself up to secondary infection. It's not a good idea. Try to restrain yourself if possible. And folks ask me all the time, what do I put on it whenever I've been stung? And because I'm not a medical professional, I'm not allowed to tell you. You'll have to seek a professional medical opinion about that. But
what would you do?
Well, I can't tell you what I would do.
But my grandma.
Now, they were. I know they call me pretty often, and they're on the phone and describing the ant to me. It's black, small, it's got thick legs. They have antennae. And tell me what it is. It's black ant of some kind. And it's usually not a good picture. We actually have to look at super, super, super fine characters to identify this thing, and I'll tell you some of the characters in a minute. But Dr. Tim Davis, for his dissertation work in 2009, did a survey of the ants of South Carolina. He found at least 121 different species in 38 different genera. That is not counting arboreal ants, that's not counting urban ants. That is strictly what he found that bubbled into a pitfall trap out in the landscape. So we think species diversity is actually somewhere around 200, 225, 250 species of ants. So when you describe an ant to me, I applaud you for your effort. I tried to draw me a picture. But typically that's not going to work. I've got to see some other stuff. Now, when you look at this, how many species of ants do you see? A lot. There's 7. But to you guys, I mean, they all kind of look the same, right? Except the one at the top. Well, the thing is that, so that's funny. So they're approved common names as little black ants. I'll have people call me and say, wow, they're little black ants. And I'm like, do you have little black ants or are they small black ants? Oh, there's a difference. But so one of the first characters I'm looking at whenever we're trying to identify ants is we want to know, are they monomorphic or are they polymorphic? So monomorphic means that everybody has the same body type. And then polymorphic means that there's a whole bunch of different body sizes. This makes a difference because fire ants are polymorphic. So all of these different body sizes are found in a fire ant colony. Now, because fire ants they have complete metamorphosis. That means they have an egg stage, a larval stage, a pupal stage, and then they have the adult. So once they emerge as an adult, that's as big as it's going to get. So this little one is not going to grow to be a bigger one. It's going to stay little. This is what it is. But this whole range are in a fire ant colony. The second thing I'm going to look at is, do those ants are they one node ants or are they two node ants? And when I'm talking about a node, I'm talking about these structures on the petiole. The petiole is a structure between the thorax and the abdomen. I want to know if they have one node or two nodes. Because when you start looking at the dichotomous P, it starts out as one node ants and two node ants. And so this eliminates a whole bunch of them if we know that it's got two nodes. We're also going to at the fact that it's got a 10-segmented antennae with a 2-segmented club. And then when we look at their mandibles, there are 4 teeth on their mandible. And then this is really important that they have a stinger. Those characters are going to help us identify fire ants. Some other ants, when we're looking at them to help identify them, I'm looking at the profile of the thorax. Does it have a denture there? Is there a cone there? Does it have spines there? Are there hairs around their anus? Or is there an acetopore there? How many antennal segments do they have? How many segments are on their club? Do they have a club? How many teeth are on their mandibles? Features like that are what we're looking at. So a hand-drawn picture isn't going to work. We're going to have to send it off.
Since the adult size dictate function.
So the question was, does the adult size dictate function? And no, adult size does not dictate function. Age of the ant dictates function. So it doesn't matter how big you are. That doesn't mean you're going to go out and be a forager or one that goes out and fights. That doesn't have anything to do with it. The younger ones are going to be nurse ants, and the older ants, the older workers, are going to be foragers, and they're the ones that are going to sacrifice their lives. So I have a lot of folks that'll, whenever they see this, these are fire ants, they're dead. But when they see this, they're like, those are a lot smaller than I thought they would be, or those are a lot bigger than I thought they would be, and I don't know what everybody was picturing, but this is what it is. Y'all are welcome to look around. So fire ants are not native to our area. They are imported, not on purpose, but they are imported. They're from South America. We actually have 2 species here. There's a red imported. So first off, we have native fire ants, and those aren't an issue. What we're talking about are imported fire ants. There's a black imported species, there's a red imported species, and fun fact, there's a hybrid. And the hybrid has been in the news lately. because they recently discovered it in like Virginia. We've been dealing with hybrid fire ants for 25, 30 years. I mean, we've known about it for a really long time. So it's not really anything new. They're just, I guess they're just now figuring it out that they're in Virginia. But so what happened is early on, North America was shipping farm equipment down to South America. South America didn't have anything to ship back to North America. And so they filled the boats with ballast. They filled the boat with soil for ballast. And when they got to the Port of Mobile, they dumped out the dirt. Well, guess what's in it? Fire ants. They spread pretty darn quickly. And in 1918 is when they found a black imported species. Between 1933 and 1945, they found a red imported species. By the 1970s, much of the southeastern U.S. had fire ants. Why? What did they build in the 1970s?
Interstates.
The interstate. And so now they've got lots of nursery stock, sod, and soil movement across the road, right? In 1998, they were discovered in California. By 2000, they were in 13 states and Puerto Rico. 2001, they were found in Australia and New Zealand. 2004, they were found in Taiwan and China. 2005, in Hong Kong and Philippines. 2017, they were found in Japan and Korea. The point of that is you can see how fast they move. And one of the reasons why is because there's no natural enemy down anywhere that they're going to help keep those populations in check. So in South America, the fire ant populations are 5 times less than what they are in our area. Why? Because there are diseases, there are pathogens, there are biological control agents such as the flies. The other ant species help control them. There's parasitic nematodes, there's diseases, there's all sorts of stuff that help keep populations in check. We don't have those here. And so that's why these things are able to be as prolific as they are outside of their native range. So for the most part, we don't have this. But when you look at this picture, this is a cow pasture, but these are not cow patties. These are fire ant mounds. So this is out in Texas, and they have a situation where there's multiple queen colonies. These are called polygon colonies. These are significantly more difficult to manage, and there's a lot more of them. 200 to 800 mounds per acre. Okay. Now, I've made it sound great. Because here we have monogyne colonies that have 1 queen, and we have 15 to 80 mounds per acre. That sounds so bad now, doesn't it? Yes. But there's 1 queen per colony. The mounds tend to be very, very large. And because of the way that this structure is set up, these worker ants are more territorial than if they're polygon colonies. So that works in our favor in that they kind of help manage themselves partially, because when a newly mated queen drops down and she's looking for a new place to start a colony, she's not going to be able to do that because she'll get preyed on by the established colonies already there. So it's actually not a bad thing to leave 1 or 2 mounds in the corners of the yard where nobody goes. Does that make sense? This is old, but for the most part, you can see the distribution of fire ants. It's the basic victim line, but why do they kind of?
Yankees won't let them go up there. Ross?
It's the weather. For the most part, it's the climate. Why are they not really out here?
Too dry.
Yep, too dry. So because they're insects, they do have to have some humidity. These are tropical insects. So they need that humidity. And this it does limit where they're going to be out west. So how do fire ants spread? And there's the transport of nursery stock, sod, and soil. there's the transport of mated queen in pickup trucks, railroad cars, trailers, all that kind of stuff. They're females, they like shiny stuff, and that's how they get to the vehicles. They transported that way. And then they also have this thing called rafting. So rafting is in the news pretty often after some major weather events, particularly after hurricanes, because this is a behavior that fire ants have evolved with. And in South America, they're floodplain insects. And so they're used to the water levels going up and down, where they have to have some kind of mechanism to work with that and live in that environment, right? So they're covered with all these little hairs, and those hairs are hydrophobic, so they repel water. And when there's a flooding event, the way that they cope with that rising water levels is that everybody bands together, they hold hands, they put the brood and the queen in the middle of this, and everybody takes turns being on the bottom. Okay, and they rotate, and that ball kind of floats around until they find a favorable place, the water level goes down, and then they can start a new mound. Okay, and the cool thing is that they won't break the surface tension. So they're using a stick to push down this raft. Can y'all see the surface of the water bending? And I told you that they found these little hairs on them that are hydrophobic. So this female right here, she's been tethered underwater, but she's pulling the bubble up under her pen. And when they get trapped under the water, they'll pull that bubble under their pen, and then they'll push the bubble to the water surface to help break the tension, and then they can come out of the water. And so they've built this mechanism for them. Then they also spread through mating flights. And with all this rain, you guys have seen these mounds pop up, right? Have y'all paid attention to where the top of the mound it becomes kind of friable? They open it up and you start seeing like a lot of ants coming out, despite the fact you haven't stepped on it or got close to it or stirred it up or anything like that. So mating flights happen right after the rain. And it's going to happen within about 24 hours. The temperatures are going to be relatively mild, between 70 and 95. Low wind, high humidity. And the males and females are going to go up several hundred feet, have their mating flight. They'll mate and then drop back down to the ground. And the thing is that we're going to have folks that they're going to say, I found black ants or I found red ants. And whenever it comes to fire ants, you can't identify the species, whether it's a black imported fire ant or a red imported fire ant or a hybrid, by the color. The only thing you can use the color for is to identify between male and female. So the males are going to be all black. They've got kind of a big hump back. Sometimes we call them buffalo ants. They got a little bitty head. They only have one job. They don't need a lot of brains. And then we have the female over here. She's kind of a uniform rusty brown. Her head is proportional to her body. She's got more work to do. And so after these mating flights, the males are going to drop down. They're going to die. The females are going to drop down, and they're going to remove their wings because they don't need them anymore. So what they're going to do is start looking for a place to start a new mound and a new colony. And I'm using two different words. So whenever I say colony, I'm talking about the ants themselves. Whenever I'm talking about a mound, I'm talking about the dirt structure. So she's looking for a new place to start a mound and a new colony. And she's going to lay a first little batch of eggs if she doesn't get eaten by something. And those eggs are going to hatch. The larvae, she's going to feed them oil from her crop, some unfertilized eggs, and then protein secretions. And she's going to, they're going to start this ball rolling. After about a month, she's going to open up, the workers are going to open up that mound. They're going to start actual mound construction. They're going to start foraging, feeding her, and she's going to start her job of becoming an egg-laying machine. She's laying several hundred eggs per day now. The mounds are going to be typically small, and this is what we're going to see. Now, When they're like this and we just barely see them up above the ground, they're typically, in our head, we're like, oh, that just popped up there. But it's probably been there 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We just didn't see it. This is one of the things that we're used to seeing in our area. And depending on your soil type is how large the actual dirt structure can be. 24 to 40 inches wide, 15 inches high. We've seen them in Talladega County, which is clay soil, like clay that cracks, like break your pickaxe cracks. And we've seen them like hip high, built on like a fence post to help with the structure. So they can be very, very large. By the time the colony is mature, the carrying capacity is anywhere from 200 to 400,000 individuals. That's going to be about it. And by this time, the queen is laying her own weight in eggs per day. And when we're looking down, we need to think about it like an iceberg. Okay, we see a little bit on top, but the majority of it is underneath, and there's no openings on top. So when we go and put a fire ant bait on top of it, that's not doing anything because that's not where the fire ants forage. All of their entrances are around the outside perimeter of it. And additionally, when you go and stir up that ant mound and then pour on some bait, number one, that's not how you're supposed to use it. If you read the label tells you don't stir up the mound. Because what happens is those teachers think that the bait made their house fall in, and so they're acting aggressively. They'll pick it up and then they're pitching that bait. They're not actually using it. Now, when I use the word bait, that's different than a contact insecticide. If you're using something like Orthene or Seven Dust, that's different. I'm talking about a bait product that looks like yellow corncob grits. That's what I'm talking about is the bait product. We'll talk about it in a minute.
How deep into the ground?
The question was how deep into the ground? So it depends on the water table. There's always going to be at least one tunnel that goes to the water table. So it depends. Now, we need to remember that all critters have jobs, and some of them are good jobs. We need to think about well, the fire ants are bringing up, making more friable. They're adding pore space. Pore space is places for air, water, not oxygen for our plants. Good thing, right? I think that's in my slide. So most of the time we think of them as non-beneficial insects, right? When they're present, we do need to remember that as scavengers, so these are generalist omnivores, we need to remember that as scavengers, they help us clean things up. So if you're a hunter and you have put a deer skull or a carcass into a fire ant mound, they clean it very quickly and very efficiently. They're excellent at it. And we need that. And something else is when fire ants are present in an ecosystem, they're one of the top predators in that ecosystem. So whenever it comes to managing caterpillars that may be eating your vegetable garden, whenever it comes to flea larvae, tick larvae, you've got, I don't know, any kind of thing that you deem a pest, they help manage those. So we need to remember that, okay? Cool. All right. We're going to get back to it, but I want to throw this in there that back in 2008, just 2008, I don't know how long ago, 2008, like this hurts my heart thinking, how old are you? Almost 13. Okay. Okay. 2008, that fire ants were costing Americans more than $6 billion in 2008. Who knows how much that is now? All right. As non-beneficial insects, you guys have probably seen this in your vegetable patch. Possibly in your wildflower gardens, if you paid attention, when you have something like aphids or soft scale, they tend to make those populations worse because they are not preying on those insects. What they are is those are sap feeding insects, and those insects feed on that plant. The sap comes in, and then the sap comes back out as honeydew. And then they tend those insects to get that honeydew. That's a reward for them. And so they protect those insects, make those populations worse. There's also direct and indirect effects on vertebrates. Now, direct effects are, we know that they prey on nestlings, right? But it's not just birds in nests. You've got ground nesting birds. You've got when horses are birthing, when you've got calves dropping, you've got kids dropping, the kids like goats, not dropping, then, if those babies don't get off the ground pretty darn quickly, they can succumb to fire ants because fire ants are essentially ubiquitous. When they looked at the succession of fire ants at a dead body, like the studies at the body farm at the University of Tennessee, they found that fire ants show up, I'm talking quick. It's one of the first insects to show up. And so this is a hazard when you've got babies on the ground. And then also if you've got sick animals that are on the ground that maybe they can't get up as quickly, that those are also being stung. So that's something to be mindful about. Now, we know that rat snake, all sorts of things prey on nestlings, but fire ants are an issue also. Now, one of the issues that I found very surprising was that in 2013, y'all are familiar with Jason Lane's study where he's saying that fire ants really don't have a big impact on bluebirds. And what he's finding is that the real effect is coming from other outside entities and not fire ants. It's coming from weather. Y'all mentioned rain getting into the boxes, blowing rain getting into the boxes, drought, pesticide use, the reduction of habitat overall, all those things. Another thing that we know about fire ants is that how many of y'all have tried to plant something and they killed it? This is a big issue in Florida down in the citrus groves where they're girdling the smaller citrus trees. Did y'all know that?
No.
You know that they would do that?
No.
You've also got it where they'll attack sound fruit. The majority of our insects tend not to attack sound fruit. How many of y'all have tried to grow okra and have fire ants at the same time? They will eat the pods. And blueberries, it's not just damaged blueberries, sound blueberries. Whenever it comes to corn, they eat the embryo out of the corn. And then you go out in your garden and you've planted something in the ground and then it's covered in fire ants because there's lots of water out here, warm, there's usually some mulch. You've got insects out here, so there's lots of food for them. So your garden is a great place for them to hang out. Not so much for you, but it is for them. Then you can also find fire ants the process. We had a phone call from the airport in Auburn. They said, "Hey, we need y'all's help. They are knocking out the runway lights. The fire ants are knocking out the runway lights." Well, fun fact: the Auburn Airport is where they have flight school. That's where Auburn University's aviation has flight school. And you need the lights to land the planes at night. And so we had to go work on that. One of the issues that they cause is that they'll chew the insulation off of the wires. And if they don't knock the lights out or knock the power out, they can start fires that way too. So,
I had my pool pump go that way.
with fire ants?
Oh, yeah.
Fires. How many of you guys have tried to dig out your valves for your irrigation system with a fire ant mound in there? I guarantee you would rather have black widows in that valve box than have fire ants. in the valve box. There's lots and lots of different formulations of products out there. I'm gonna talk about one of them. And, you know, it's one of that things where a lot of folks don't want to use a pesticide. And I'm telling you, whenever it comes to pesticides, generally, if you use them the way that you're supposed to, they're safe. Now, what I'm telling you about Fire Ant Bait is that this is some of the safest products on the market. They're applied at a very low volume. There's very low percentage of active ingredient in it. You're only applying it 1 or 2 times a year, so you're really not putting a lot of pesticide out into the environment, and it works. Okay? We're gonna talk about it. It would not be an extension agent talk if I didn't tell you to follow the label. But I'm always gonna tell you, how many of y'all actually read the label? The whole thing, the whole thing. Okay. Lots of products out there, and we've got folks that want to treat individual mounds, and almost everybody tries to treat individual mounds. But we found that it's expensive. If you apply it how you're supposed to, it's expensive. It's much cheaper to broadcast it over your whole landscape. It requires a lot of time because you have to go find the mound, treat it with whatever you're treating it with, right? And then go find the next one and treat that one too, right? But I'm willing to bet that you're going to miss a bunch of them, right? So it tends to be very labor intensive, and then it's really not that effective. Because when you're individually mound treating and you're using a contact insecticide, you're going to kill some workers, but you're probably going to kill the queen. And the whole purpose of this thing is we've got to kill the queen in order to stop this whole machinery, okay? So we tell people to use a bat. What is the bat? And it looks like grits. It's ground up yellow corn cob grits. There is a route out there that you can use grits, and like quick grits or instant grits or Jimmy Dean grits, whatever. You can put them on a fire ant mound, and then they'll eat them, and then they'll blow up. That is not how that works. Ants have a structure in their throat called a crop, and it is a filter, and they typically cannot ingest solid food. So all you're doing is giving them something to eat later. There's no toxicant in grits. I mean, we're all fine. And so that's not how that works. But a bait is yellow brown corncob grit plus oil. It tends to be soybean oil because it's cheap. And then there's a toxicant in it, and that's the soybean oil is used as an attractant, and then the ants pick it up. So the way this works is that the queen is going to lay an egg. After about a week, it'll hatch, and then it goes into the larval stage. There's going to be 4 larval instars, and we'll talk about it in a second. And then there's a pupal stage. They'll be in the pupal stage 9 to 16 days, and then they emerge as an adult. Now, the important part is that the adults are going to forage and bring that food item back to the 4th instar larva. Not the 1st instar, not the 2nd instar, not the 3rd instar, but the 4th instar larva. That is the only life stage in the fire ant colony that can ingest solid food. So the forager will bring a food item to the 4th instar larva. They'll set it on the 4th instar larva's chest. It's called a buccal pouch. They're going to burp up all these digestive enzymes and turn this into a liquid food. And then the ant is going to come over to that 4th instar larva. It's called antination. They're going to rub on that larva, get her to give up that liquid food, and then she's going to pass that on to the nurse ant. The next ant goes to the other one. They antinate, they exchange the food, and this is a liquid food, and this is called tropholysis. And the way this works is that your baits cannot be so toxic that they kill the ant that picked it up. It has to make it back to the 4th instar larva. get turned into a liquid food, and then get passed along to all these other ants before it can get to the queen. That's why it's not very toxic. And that's why it takes a long time. Now, when you're working with a bait, there are disadvantages because it doesn't store very well. Because there's soybean oil in it, the oil can get affected. And so you only buy enough that you're going to use in one season. We'll talk about it. The timing of the applications is important. You can't just go out and put it out any time of year because fire ants don't always digest it. So in the dead of winter, you can put out bait. They'll pick it up, but they may not digest it because the way their metabolism works is based off of the weather. If it's too cold, what they deem as too cold, they'll pick it up, but they're not going to digest it. They're foraging because that's what they're programmed to do. Is they're going to forage and they'll pick it up. But and then you also have the issue with what time of day you put it out. If you put it out in the heat of the day, the UV rays are going to degrade the insecticide. The heat will make the soybean oil go rancid, and it smells bad, tastes bad, the ants won't pick it up. So you have to be mindful of that. Should we refrigerate it? The question was, should you refrigerate it? The label says do not refrigerate it. It says store it dry, out of the sun in cool, consistent conditions. Now, the advantages of baits is that they're easy to apply because typically we are broadcasting them through your whole yard. Y'all know that whenever you fertilize your yard, if you walk a line and it's a little bit hanky on that line, you can see where you went awry, right? Whenever it comes to fire ant bait, we don't have to be very exact. Now, as an extension agent, we are not allowed to recommend any particular company or brand or anything like that. But these spreaders do really, really nicely for us. And you set the gate on them to the smallest setting so that the bait still comes out. The hopper holds about 1 pound of bait. And this one is hand powered. We tell people to turn slow and walk fast. This one is battery powered, so you can set this one, just hold it, and you just have to walk at a consistent speed. But these two products work really well to get your bait out. We don't want to use a belly spreader like one with a bag on it because you typically can't get the gate small enough to put out the right amount of bait. Those often put out too much bait. We don't use a drop spreader because that puts out way too much bait. We're putting out 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per acre. This is not satisfying. If you are a person that wants to go out there and see a plume of something or smell it, to know that you have made a pesticide application, this is not going to get it for you. This is not how baits work. So when you put out a bait, it's 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per acre. So think of a 12-inch by 12-inch tile, a linoleum tile. It's like 10 or 12 little pieces on there. There's not going to be a big cloud coming out of your spreader when you put this stuff out.
When you said too much, that means it's just being wasted, not that the ants are going to take it.
The question was, whenever I say too much, am I worried about the ants being wasted? It's too much as in it's more than what the label calls for, and it's not going to do any good. So yes, wasted. If you've got more than 5 acres, you can use a seeder. Kurt worked with us to develop this seeder. This hopper holds 25 pounds, and they've got restrictor plates. So depending on what product you buy, they tell you what plate to put in it. They tell you how fast to drive so that it puts out 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per acre. So it's a great product. You can put it out aerially, and it is efficient aerially. Now the thing about whenever you're broadcasting a bait is that the ants do the work for you. You don't have to be exact, but they can forage up to a football field away from their mound, depending on territory and their territory size. But they can forage really far away. So if you've got a body of water, you don't have to put it down that ditch bank. You can put it on food, stay on the road, and they'll forage up the ditch banks to come pick it up. You don't have to put it in every single nook and cranny and be super exact with your bait applications because they're going to forage out and go pick up this stuff. And you guys are going to ask as part of the Bluebird Society, well, I'm worried about the birds foraging and picking this stuff up. And I'm not worried about the birds foraging and picking this stuff up because when fire ants are present and they are foraging, they're going to beat those other animals to this product. So I have witnessed it myself where you put the bait out and I have seen it within seconds, they are picking it up. And we have found that within about 30 minutes, they picked up the majority out of the environment. Within about 2 hours, you can go to the mounds and you can find that bait in those mounds. You're not going to see it out in landscape. Now you're asking, well, how much? You know, I've got chickens. I do have to worry about my foraging birds. What do I do about it? And you are making sure that you are putting this bait out whenever the fire ants are foraging. So you use the highly scientific potato chip test to find out if they're foraging. You put a regular greasy potato chip out, you leave it 10, 15, 20 minutes. You come back, see if there's fire ants on the potato chip. If there's fire ants on it, that means that they're foraging and you can put your bait out. If there's no fire ants on your potato chip, that means it's too hot, too cold, too windy, something's happening, they're not foraging. Do not put your bait out because they're not going to come pick it up. Okay? How do you know if they're fire ants? If you touch them, they'll tell you if they're fire ants. There's lots of products out there that are available. What do we do about fire ants in the vegetable garden? There are products that you can use in the vegetable garden. If your beds are very, very small, and this is what I told Diddy to do out there at Woodside, you can treat outside of the beds, especially if you have like a raised bed. You can treat outside of them, and those fire ants are going to forage out so that you're not actually putting any product inside the garden. But whenever you're using fire ant bait, again, this stuff is not taken up by the plant. Super safe, very low volume, very low percentage of active ingredient. And so it's really not an issue, but there are products that are labeled specifically for use inside the vegetable garden. So the stuff that's labeled for your turf and ornamentals is not labeled for inside the garden. You have to use a different product. Or you can treat outside of the garden bed with a turf and ornamental product. Never, ever, ever throw your bait into the water. It's not safe. So pay attention to where the water lines, how the water levels fluctuate. We do tell people to use the Texas two-step, where you put out your bait products.
I killed a bunch of my chickens in Florida with anthrax. And it's really, I didn't know the fact about forage. They don't forage. In Florida, we had serious problems with fire ants, coming in. It would be, it's interesting. I mean, I didn't know the foraging thing. It's not well known. In Florida, they just say throw it on the anthills. And I killed, and it was not a nice death, several of my phantom pet chickens with it. So I was just horrified, about that. It's a shame that there's not some way that it can be better known how to apply, because I read all the directions and it says toxic to birds. And so unfortunately didn't read it till after I'd killed my chickens. It would be interesting if there was some way that there was a more detailed way that can go on these products that tell you how to apply them rather than just use them. And that's the unfortunate part, because there's no directions other than just use them for fire ants, and the little bitty thing says oh, it's toxic to birds and aquatics. So, you know, I learned by.
And you can't be everywhere.
Yeah, and, you know,
They sell the product in lots of feed stores and stuff.
it's all everywhere.
Yeah, I
We don't
think
get
that might be a bigger discussion for us to have later.
Yeah.
But I disagree with some of the statements, about it not being on the labels and things like that, because it is on the label.
It just says it's toxic. It doesn't really tell you to only do it when they're foraging. I mean, that's an excellent
Well-
idea. Because who knows when they're foraging, they're ants, they bite you all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion for later, but it does tell you on the label. We can talk about it though. Well, we can talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I'm not saying it's fault at all, you know,
Uh.
I'm just saying it's the fault of the manufacturers, they don't sell it.
So, yeah, I'm happy to have a discussion. Because I know exactly what to talk about. So, we do recommend that you have the Texas food set. This is where you put out a bait. And then, 7 to 10 days later, you'll come back and treat the problem mounds, with a contact insecticide, when you knock those down a little bit faster, because your bait products tend to take, depending on what product you purchase, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to work. So, because it takes a long time, remember, you can't be super toxic, otherwise you'll kill your foragers before they get it back to the queen. So this is one of the reasons why it takes so long. So you might have to end up treating, a few days later with a contact insecticide to help you get those problem mounds.
I found it successful. I had rented at least some property that had mounds. Small, it had a paddocks and I had all these mounds. But in the winter, when I know there was going to be like a freezing rain, that's when I treated the mounds. Because
With what?
I can't remember. I think it was the same thing that she was talking about, Ambrose or something like that. I can't remember because my husband picked it up and it said it was just for mounds. Freezing rain, it rained. And since they're all hunkering down because its temperature's cold, I just thought literally, I mean, I didn't kill the whole mound, but I couldn't believe how many they were taking their injured soldiers out. And then when it came near the time in spring, when they're starting to forage, then I did the bait. And I literally, within this lease property, I noticing I got rid of, I mean, no mounds after, I will say like 6 months later, it was like, you never see any more mounds.
So we did research where we drug the mounds in the wintertime. These were hay pastures. And we found that it was not effective long term. What tended to happen is you would disturb the mounds enough and then they would go out to the edges of the pastures. That didn't actually kill anybody. And when you put the bait out at that time, that's not the appropriate time of year to put the bait out. But it does depend on what bait product you're using. If you're using a mound treatment bait product, that may not be an actual bait product. It may be a contact insecticide.
For the bait product, I was using Extinguish is what I was using.
So the timing for the majority of our landscape is going to be late May, early June. So whenever I was talking to Janice's garden club about hydrangeas, she was asking, hey, can you come talk to the Bluebird Society? I said, absolutely. And I said, but the timing is critical. We can't just have this talk any time of year because folks get all hyped up because I'm such a great speaker and they get hyped up. I'm going to go out and put this stuff out. But it's late May, early June, late September, early October. Because what you're doing is when you treat in the spring, you're managing the fire ant colonies all the way through the summertime. You apply in the fall, and then you're managing the fire ants through the winter into the next spring. So you're putting yourself on a program for 2 times per year. Yes, you're going to have fire ants in between, but getting 60 to 80% control is much better than 0% control, right? And this is one of those things where I was telling Margaret and Jim over here that you can't, when you put out a bait product for fire ants, you need to think about that you're not going to kill every single ant in the landscape. It is not possible. You kill one species, you're creating a niche. There's going to be another species is going to move in, or fire ants might move back in if you clear those out. But you're never, ever, ever going to get rid of all ants, and it's not going to last forever. Otherwise, I would not be here because I would be really, really rich drinking an umbrella drink on my own island, right? And so you have to make sure that you're treating properly. We want to make sure that it's dry. We're storing these baits in a cool, dry area, not refrigerated, but just cool. Which means you're not keeping it out in your garage, not keeping it out in a non-climate controlled building like a shop, because that oil can go rancid. We also don't want to store it with like a weed eater, or your gas cans, because they can pick up the smell, from those other things. So, if we're only going to treat once, spring treatments are going to be the most effective. So the majority of the southeastern United States is in quarantine. They're in fire quarantine. So you have to be mindful where you're shipping stuff and what you're shipping and all that kind of thing. Yep.
It also said water it in,
Those are granular.
like Andrew.
No, Ambro is not a water in product. That's not a granular.
Oh.
Ambro is a bait.
Oh.
Granulars are like Top Choice, Peppermill, something like that. All right. Our takeaway here is that there's no silver bullet. You are going to have to use tools in your toolbox. We're using fire ant bait. Those are safe. And our objective is to find and use the methods that are the most environmentally sound. That's why we're using bait and we're not using contact insecticides for the most part. We're trying to stay away from those as much as possible because contact insecticides are general insecticides. They're broad spectrum. They kill a lot of stuff, not just fire ants. And what do your bluebirds eat? A lot of stuff. So we're not trying to obliterate every insect out there. We're just trying to manage fire ants. And so that's a very different approach that we're trying to use. We're also trying to find something that's cost effective. When you use a fire ant bait, it tends to be $25, $35 an acre. When you're using this product. And then we also have to find products that manage fire ants at a tolerant level that we can live with. That may mean adjusting your tolerance level to fire ants, okay? You have to remember that the reality is that you will not get 0 ants. You may get 100% control for a very short period of time, but it's not going to last. Be happy with 60 to 80% control, okay? Here is my contact information. Y'all can take pictures. This is my cell phone. You can take pictures of your ants, but I'm probably not going to be able to identify it. And I can identify them. So I brought some fact sheets with me. This is from the Clemson Home and Garden Information Center. Who uses the HGIC? Who's heard of it? You don't count it. You don't need that. You're all master gardeners. It's heard of the HGIC. Okay, the Clemson Home and Garden Information Center has more than 950 fact sheets on it. There are hundreds of other publications on it also. But it's got a really good fact sheet. It's not just because I wrote it, but there's a good fact sheet on fire management, and it goes through the steps that I laid out in this hour-long talk in only 2 pages. So it tells you that I talk a lot. But these are available for you guys. Take one if you want one. I've also got business cards here, and then I've got cards for the HGIC also. Let's see. What other questions might you have? Stuff from last year. The question was, if the stuff from last year isn't even worth using. So, who knows how to get rid of old or excess pesticide? You do not throw it in the trash. You do not throw it in the toilet. You do not take it to the dumpster. You apply it according to the label. And just know that it may or may not work as if it was fresh. But that's the most efficient way, the best way to get rid of it. There are pesticide collection days, but they typically don't come anywhere close to us. They typically go to York County, Charleston, Florence, and I know y'all are gonna drive all the way up there for a pound steak. So you can use the old stuff, you can open it up and smell it, and you can tell if it's good or not, if the oil's gone rancid. You can put it out, and they may not pick it up, and it may not be as effective as if it were fresh.
You mentioned that, they're the top predator, but then when the queen was worried about when she does no wings that she might get eaten, are you talking about the territorial other fire ant mounds, or there are other predators for them otherwise?
So the question was, whenever I mentioned that they're a top predator, but then I also mentioned that when the newly mated queen comes down and she removes her wings, she's going to get eaten by something. Well, how does that work? Typically, the reproductives are not the ones, so they're not using their stingers as stingers. They're using them as an egg laying mechanism. So a stinger is a modified ovipositor, and that's the egg laying mechanism. And she's not using it that way. She's using it as an actual egg laying mechanism. So she's not stinging anything. She's also not going out there. She's not foraging for herself, really. And so when those newly mated queens drop down, they're pretty vulnerable. They're big and clunky. They get eaten by birds, they get eaten by fish, they get fried on a hot patch of dirt, get eaten by a lizard. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. And so they drown. So it's more of an environmental thing, typically.
Everything you said is that this is a slow process that you took. One of the boxes I was monitoring a year or so ago, I had a baby bluebird, and one day I went to check it. Surprise! Here's a fire ant mound exactly under the post.
Yep.
What do I do to protect the bluebirds in this?
So, I said that the baits are a slow process, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what product you buy. There is one bait product that works faster, but it's expensive and it's hard to find. So what do we do in an emergency situation? Because Jim's found a box, got a fire ant mound at the bottom of the pole. What do we do? You can use contact insecticide to kill that one mound. That's going to be the fastest thing to do. You're probably not going to kill the queen, but you can kill a good number of the workers, make them mad at us where they move, but still treat the area around it with bait. You're going to ask, well, what about using boiling water? Okay. So boiling, we'll talk about it. Boiling water. With the research has found, depending on the size of the mound, typically you need anywhere from 3 to 5 gallons of boiling water to actually kill a mature mound. Are y'all going to be able to get out there with 3 to 5 gallons of boiling water without scalding yourself? I'm talking at one time. Without scalding yourself? Probably not. And then whenever you pour that boiling water into the soil profile there, you are killing everything in that soil profile. All the microbes, everything in that soil, all the insects. I'm talking like the grass is dead and it's not going to grow back for it's tough whenever you use boiling water. So I don't recommend it, just mostly because it's unsafe. And then we have folks that want to use a petroleum product. And typically a man wants to light it on fire.
Yeah.
If you can light it on fire, it's even better. We don't recommend that because it is toxic to the soil profile. It is illegal, but it's also not effective. So it might make you feel good in the moment, and I can appreciate it, but it's not recommended. We had my old boss at Auburn got a phone call from a news station, said, hey, will you come be on camera, talk about fire ants? He said, sure. We tried to get a background of why you want to be on, why do you want us to talk to you? A man, we had two separate ones. One man had burned down a hayfield that did not belong to him. Hundreds of acres, it was a bad deal. And then another one, burnt their house down because they poured gasoline onto a fire ant mound. They didn't light it, but it followed the gas line and the fumes hit the pilot light and burned their house down. So we do not recommend using a petroleum product.
You were talking about a stinger, and a fire ant stinging more than one.
So the question was, can a fire ant sting you more than one? Absolutely. They don't have a barbed stinger like a honeybee does. And so when they sting you, it goes in. It's like a little hypodermic needle. They go in and they actually don't pump. So one of the pictures I showed, there's a structure called a Dufour's organ, and it's a pump. And oh yeah. So when they sting you, when that thing goes in, the organ pumps.
Oh.
That thing right here.
Oh.
It's called a Dufour organ.
Question about all the things that you can. I think one guys think. But.
How did I get involved with
Bad experience with counting that on a mound or something?
So when I graduated undergraduate, I graduated December 16th of 2000, and graduation day, my dad said, I hope you can pay the bills at the end of the month. He cut me off on graduation day. And I started,
I'm with my grandson.
I started work, the first week of January the next year. And studying ants. A friend of mine knew my old boss. He knew the girl that, and so somebody knew somebody that knew somebody, and I got a job. And
So the job was, the only job was to do ants.
it wasn't the only job, but it was a good job.
Study ants. So you followed the ants for the money.
I did not make money. There was no money. No money.
We can always rent it.
The question was, have I always been interested in insects in general? So I have an undergraduate degree in wildlife sciences, and I wanted to be a game warden. Well, number one, they didn't hire women in Alabama in 2000. But number two, I can get lost in a paper bag, and that's not good for when they turn you loose in the woods and you're supposed to navigate somewhere. So I had to find some other profession. Yeah.
How does the queen move out and start?
The question is how does the queen ant move out to find to start another colony if the other ants are territorial? So when they have that mating flight, they'll fly up several hundred feet into the air, and they get caught on the air current. They can move around anywhere from 3 to 5 miles, depending on the air current. They're going to drop down, and the majority of them are going to end up dying before they can start that colony, but a small percentage, apparently a big enough percentage so that we can have 15 to 80 mounds per acre, are able to find some little place that's protected where they can start. So it doesn't take a lot, and you have to think about their size relative to the environment. So there's actually a lot of room for them to. They're pretty good chances.
This is a new queen that was developed, or this is an old queen that decides to leave?
The question was, is the queen that starts the colony, is that a new queen or an old queen? It's a new queen. Yep. The old queen's gonna stay with her man in her colony.
And is that determined by certain biological changes when the egg is laid, that it's going to be a queen versus a worker?
If, so the question was, how do we figure out if they're gonna be reproductives or non-reproductives?
Mhm.
It has to do with, the DNA and the haploidy, diploidy type stuff. I don't remember exactly what it is. But the workers are different than the reproductives.
This week, males be like one of the.
The question was, is who do the new queens mate with? Wouldn't the males want to stick with the old queen? No. When a man produces reproductive, they'll have the males and the females. The alates, the ones with the wings, those are gonna mate with each other. They're gonna mix around, and the different colonies all have their mating flights about the same time. So they're all having those mating flights up there. They're not mating with the old queen. The old queen mates one time. And she's done.
How long does she last?
Jim's asking how long does she live? So on that wheel with all the different ants of the different sizes, the smaller ones live 60 to 90 days, the larger ones live 90 to 120 days, and the queens can live up to 7 years.
How long?
Wow. Now it's gonna decrease as she gets older. But
What's one thing?
Get really annoying here. So is she storing sperm or are they fertilized and then like stop at a certain stage?
the question was, is does she store sperm or are these fertilized? I don't remember. I have to look it up.
Bees just store it.
There's a lot of insects that store it. I don't remember the exact mechanism. Rather look it up than tell you. Then guess. All right, I got plenty of stuff hanging out here. Y'all call me, text me, email me. I'm happy to.
Vicki, want to thank you for that. You're kind of the first presentation, so you do.
Yay!
Not involved. And so we want to thank you again for taking your time out.
Yeah, it is exciting.
Oh, y'all are so sweet.
So, our next.
I hate to do this to her, but she has to get with Dave.
24th, I believe. We'll have notices to go out from there. We appreciate everybody coming by tonight and, keep all the trails out there. We're only halfway through our nesting season right now. We still
That
have
new box.
June, July, and August to go. So
Down by
let's
the
keep
swamp?
going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's terrible weatherproofing. It got all this rain, the water just goes in there and it's.
I'm turning it the wrong direction.
We had it the opposite this way, so the thing comes up, remember?
Yeah,
Did it opposite.
yeah. That was on that hill and you couldn't
Yeah.
get into it.
And
So
it was,
it's raining right into it.
yeah.
So we need to turn it.
But it's also got, it's just made a little bit different than the other.
The roof isn't very good. The roof isn't very, doesn't have much overhang. That's the way they made all of those DNR boxes.
Yeah.
Okay. Kitty says she guarantees that you don't have snake.
Yeah.
Still, juvenile, juvenile. Yeah, okay. They have a pattern to them when they're young. If you Google rat snake, juvenile rat snake, it's Google. And there's more than just black rats, there's gray rats. I don't know, I've never seen it. Don't know that I've ever seen a gray, but. Yeah, most. They can climb like crazy. Yeah, I had 3 of them, one trip through the Southwoods, 3 of them in boxes. In one day. That was a lot of fun. And one was watching the time, waiting to get something to hang out. Came back. It's already gone, yeah. Just grab a stick and That's very good. Nice. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Wow.
Weird.